Like the recording didn't work last time, so I hope that it's gonna work this time. But anyway, so I couldn't post it because it didn't tape it. Second start. Anyway, so next week I'm gonna try to start flexible packaging next week, and then Snyder's on Thursday. So get like two classes of people talking after that. So hopefully that it won't be too broken up. Um, I looked at this thing, so I put something together on that. Like, so we were talking after class last time about sequestration, like carbon sequestration. And in terms of plastics as a form of carbon sequestration. Then someone mentioned, like, anyway, this is on the internet. I don't think this is real, but like a bird eats plastic gets killed. And then this is from a paper in Nature about this idea of carbon sequestration, which is anyway. So right, the idea is like global warming, like carbon, like plastics could store carbon, right? And then global warming, and I have this app on my phone that shows you where the fires are. This is like today, this morning, kind of like all the fires that are burning, and then the gray is like the plumes of smoke coming from the global warming fires. And this is like the low, kind of the low point of fires, in North America. I think this covers the US and Canada. But basically, there's a lot of fire stuff burning, So I think if you went up north, you'd basically find a lot of burned stuff. And that stuff's kind of gradually coming towards us too. So the carbon sequestration thing is kind of a topic to think about. And plastics could be like they could be a route to store carbon. So oils, like if plastic lasts 1,000 years, and basically you could think about storing carbon in plastic, like let the plastic, instead of kind of recycle, or you could recycle the plastic, but also even when it's being recycled, it's still storing the right. So these people wrote it. This is actually this paper was written in 2022, and then right after that, some people kind of used their data to talk about this issue, how viable it is to use plastic to store carbon dioxide. In this paper, like they go through the study of kind of like, there's a bunch of papers like this where they break down all the kind of like the whole life cycle of plastic and kind of where things are going. Anyway, so it's kind of interesting in itself, this paper. But this paper is by these two guys. One guy's from Santa Barbara, the other guy's from ET. And then anyway, so they kind of assessed the data from these other people to talk about, like, is this like a sequestration method for carbon? Like you could use plastic, and then assessed it in terms of these different schemes, like of how, like, say, bioplastics are coming in. So when you make a bioplastic, it sequesters CO2 because you get it from a plant. It's like eventually it came from a plant that took the CO2 out of the atmosphere, then you make a bioplastic with it. So if you recycle the bioplastic or just keep the bioplastic for 1,000 years, you've sequestered carbon from the atmosphere. Right. So even if it goes into a landfill, it's still trapped carbon from the atmosphere, which would address the problem of the world burning. This is today, like, so this, and this is the low point of the fire season, so basically the entire Canada is on fire. The smoke plumes, like if we didn't have these, see this light gray, like we're kind of safe right now, but usually we're in a dark gray area of the smoke plume, and it turns out people have done a study in India where they do agricultural burning, and then like in the Indian Ocean, so that blows over the Indian Ocean. It turns out that lowers the temperature by 10 degrees, like during the season when they burn the crops, the temperature. So this kind of plume of smoke is actually cooling us, so it's preventing global warming in a sense, but at the cost of like releasing a lot of carbon dioxide in the process, right? So it's pretty crazy. Like this, my radar app, I always look at this and it's like, wow, today is a bad day. Anyway, so you do want to like capture carbon somehow, and this could be a way to do it. And these people are kind of looking at that. So they have like 3 schemes. One of them is like more bioplastic, more recycling. So it's like a good scheme, a bad scheme, and a medium scheme kind of thing. Like we do nothing. The baseline would be like we do nothing. Carbon dioxide, this is just from plastics, like how many gigatons per year. And then if you have a carbon price, or if you do more recycling or have biomass, you can possibly get to this point where what I was saying could happen. You could be sequestering carbon and plastic, but not until like 2090. So still not exactly a feasible thing to do according to this study. So anyway, I just thought we talked about that after class. I just thought I'd kind of mention it. But there's some groups thinking along these lines, like L'Oreal company, and then they're using they're collecting CO2 from the processes, turning it into ethanol, and then using the ethanol to make ethylene to feed into polyethylene to make bottles for L'Oreal stuff. So that's actually one of the only cases where people are doing that. There's a bunch of other things where people talk about it, but it isn't exactly, that's all I got so far on that. But basically, I thought that was kind of interesting. There was a study, it's like a couple of years ago in Nature, which is a good journal. Anyway, so there's that business. And then so let's see, it's not what I want this. So basically last time I went through kind of federal laws and federal things, and then litigation, kind of the Ralph Nader stuff, and then I wanted to go through state laws and international. And then that also has gotten off on a kind of rabbit hole thing. So I want to talk a little bit about this advanced recycling too. So this ends up like now there's 101 slides in this thing, so they're all like nothing slides, but basically it is adding up on this. So the state laws, there's a lot going on, mostly like, most of it doesn't seem that effective though, like I ban plastic bags. Massachusetts banned the state purchase of plastic bottles. There's stuff going on like Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, whatever, Vermont, Oregon. This is Washington State. It's like one of the top ones for this kind of control of plastic waste. In other words, they have that's kind of the model. Washington State and California kind of the model for federal laws that could happen, if like something, the federal government changed somehow. But basically they have deposit return on bottles, special collection things, garbage collection. And then there's this thing about producer responsibility, which is like a kind of a catchphrase that says a lot of this kind of selling the stuff in the So you can't, like, a lot of the things are like kind of crazy and ends up being like, people are lying about things and the whole regulation of this. So, like, one is this enhanced recycling, which I'll talk about. And there's also this producer responsibility, which means that basically they're gonna divide up, like say you have a plastic bottle that gets tossed. So the company that made the plastic, like Eastman Chemicals makes PET. Then there's a company that like messes with the water, as a consumer. So this extended producer responsibility goes back to all four of those groups of people and somehow tags everyone to pay something or somehow contribute to solving the problem. Versus one company getting sued, like a litigation thing, where we're going after PepsiCo and you have to clean up the Buffalo River. So the idea of extended producer responsibility, EPR, basically is like reducing the liability of companies. It isn't necessarily like helping. So that, and then a lot of states are enacting EPR as part of their, like the more conservative states included in, and then even the ones that are liberal, they're kind of putting it in too. So it's, the whole thing is like a mishmash of pretty confusing. What things that sound good end up being bad. And, that's kind of how it works out. California has like another, like they have a bottle bill, they basically have packaged that all together into one, this act, Plastic Pollution Prevention. Producer, again, Producer Responsibility Act, it's a PRA thing, right? So there's acronyms for this. Anyway, this thing wasn't, so you'd think like California would be pretty progressive on this, but actually this was driven because there was a ballot initiative that got all the signatures to go into a state law to amend the Constitution that basically banned all plastics in California. And then like they got all the signatures they needed. And then at the last minute, the people that were organizing that negotiated with the state of California to come up with this Producer Responsibility Act law. So it was basically, they were forced to approve this. Otherwise, they would have had like a state law that, like a constitutional amendment in California that would have not really been implementable. So it was like a negotiated settlement, more or less, to get this law. So it isn't like they just were progressive or something at the start. So even in California, it's difficult. The cities that like Berkeley ban reusable plastic bags. There's a bunch of like local things like that. Colorado's got quite a bit going on with, again, it's like plastic bag ban and reusable, like single use for takeout food type things. And this is Maine has something similar to that. So it's kind of like a patchwork of laws, though. It isn't something that companies can really follow. Oregon has a Recycling Modernization Act. Then New Jersey supposedly has the tightest rules of anybody. So actually every state kind of says they have the tightest rules of everybody. So it's a little bit of like trying to figure out who actually does. And then, so then you have these kind of conservative states, and so all right, Kansas governor vetoed like the Ohio law that bans, or you can't ban can't ban reusable plastic bags in Ohio because the banning was banned. The Kansas vetoed, they tried to do a banning of similar thing and it didn't work out. The governor, I guess, is probably Democrat or something. I'm not sure what happened there. Anyway, but a lot of the states, so you have like Indiana, Utah, Kansas, and then I think 23 other states, which are basically all the kind of red states. Not Ohio, though, have these what's called advanced recycling legislation, which means like what Ryan was talking about, the idea of pyrolyzing the plastic. To collect all the plastic, put it into an autoclave, heat it up with no oxygen, and then get kind of goo out of it that you're going to somehow feed that back into the system. So there's problems with advanced recycling and that it's not circular because usually the usually what happens is it's an oil company that's doing it, and they just feed it into their fuel system, you know, so there's a variety of problems with it. It's like, this is Utah's thing, advanced recycling, Indiana, and also, so you look at these things and every one of them has the same wording. So it's one of these things where like somebody wrote the law and all the other states are just copying it. You know, like Utah, Indiana, Kansas, they're all the same exact words in the law, you know. I mean, basically, the law was written by Exxon, more or less, you know. So Exxon's like advanced recycling, you know, this is the way to go. Then there's so Kansas, the same thing, like advanced recycling. So anyway, there's this kind of book pamphlet thing against advanced recycling, which is called chemical recycling. So advanced recycling is the same thing as chemical recycling. It's just a different word for the same thing. So these people claim that there's an environmental health risk because of the products. So the products of it, so it turns out when you pyrolyze, you know, oxygen, polyethylene, polypropylene, you don't get ethylene, propylene out, or even ethane and propane. You get benzene, toluene, and a bunch of polyaromatics. And then you get all the additives also break down into weird things. So basically, and this process has been studied since the 1950s. So it isn't anything new. Basically, it's already been come to the conclusion that it is not a good thing to do, you know, to cook the plastics. And then there's various ways to cook, though. You can cook. Anyway, there's different ways to cook. I'll show you that. But basically, yeah.
I was going to say at that point, isn't it just the same as the same mode as just burning the trash?
Right. Well, there's three things. There's pyrolysis. There's no oxygen in pyrolysis, so you get kind of glue out. You get a gooey mess. And then you can pyrolyze with a little bit of oxygen, right? And then that allows you, that's kind of what's used in the wood industry to make syngas. So you can make kind of a pure product with that, but you get residuals out of it. So you're basically making a fuel, right? So you make CO and hydrogen in the process, or a syngas process. And then the third is like you can incinerate, which is what you're saying, which has been around a long time too. And according to these people, like incineration is probably the best approach, but it's not circular. Like in no way you're just making carbon dioxide from the plastic. And also, you don't get all right, so they've studied it, and you don't exactly get the bang for the buck that you expect. Like you aren't getting the full fuel out of the incineration process even. And you have a lot of ashes in this, because it's got all the metals from the pigments and whatever antioxidants that were in the material and things kind of settle out at the bottom. And there's also like byproducts that are worse than even the things you put in. Like somehow these high temperature operations can lead to worse chemicals. This is the negative side of it. You know, the positive side is that it's fresh, it's new, it's shiny. You know, that's kind of the Lyondell and Exxon and Indiana or whatever. You know, so they're kind of pitching it as advanced recycling or chemical recycling. Even both of those are kind of positive names in a sense, you know, versus incineration, which has a pretty bad name. But so anyway. So this is what these guys say, that overstating the feasibility, and then there's a huge carbon footprint to the whole thing when you do the assessment of it, and then chemical recycling won't solve the plastic crisis. It's not circular, that's what they're saying. So, I mean, so it's pretty, like there's a lot of graphics, I just kind of copied the graphics in it. We're basically showing just what I said, like pyrolysis, gasification, incineration, and then kind of the difference between the things. And kind of the steps that are the problems, like the cleanup steps lead to waste, the hazardous waste, and then mostly what you end up with is fuel, and then you can crack the fuel to make ethylene if you want, but mostly because this is not pure ethane that comes out, and the what's the stuff called? Like the kerosene that comes out of the distillation column is like pure ethane. So you can crack that and make pure ethylene and pure propylene. But this stuff has all aromatics in it, and aromatics are no good for like making polymers with, basically. You can need alkanes. So basically, the only thing it's good for is fuel, and the only kind of fuel it is like the absolute lowest quality fuel. Right, so it isn't like you're replacing gasoline with this process. So anyway, this is what they say. I mean, I think I kind of believe them, and kind of think they're definitely on the other side, so you have to think a little bit about it. So this idea of putting in oxygen in it is called gasification. It's the same as this making syngas, basically. It's kind of like you're gonna end up with something that could be used like city gas, like the same thing. So you can use it right in a gas supply. Right? And pyrolysis is just you get the heat right there. So there's a difference in, like, if you do pyrolysis or incineration, the heat you get, you have to use that on site, like wherever you are. Right. And the others, you're making a fuel that could be used somewhere else. So basically, there's some advantage to making a fuel out of it instead of just getting heat. Anyway, and then so this idea of like P2P. So again, everything has like an acronym, which means pyrolysis through plastic. Pyrolysis to plastic. But you're going to make polyethylene. You're going to make ethylene monomer by pyrolyzing polyethylene. Right. So, and then the other is like conversion to fuel, P2F. It's like you're going to just burn it. Anyway, this doesn't really work. This could work, but it's not. It doesn't have a good environmental footprint. And there's byproducts that the thing is made from. And then so the other options of this within the context of chemical recycling would be like use a solvent, which solvent removal is kind of an issue unless you use a supercritical propane or butane to do this, right? And then that's kind of got its own problems, right? And that it works for polyolefins. Basically, the separation issue doesn't seem to work in that case. So there are people using supercritical butane to dissolve polyethylene, and then you can recycle the butane in the process. Otherwise, they're using just solvents to make kind of napalm, like styrofoam or something. And then you can also do solvent-based depolymerization, which involves using a catalyst, which is expensive, right? And the catalyst residue remains in the monomers, has to be separated, and it's usually toxic. So, and the catalyst also only lasts so long, it eventually gets oxidized, I guess. That falls apart. So anyway, yeah, the problem with catalysis are like spent catalysts, costly catalysts, shows old spent catalysts, the declining effectiveness of the catalyst. And then they show, and for pyrolysis, they're talking about you have the options like using less energy, you get low temperature, but you just get like chunks of polymer in the product, so it's not as useful product. Or you can use a high temperature process, which uses a lot of energy, and then you end up with aromatics. So the higher the temperature, the more aromatics you get. The lower the temperature you don't completely depolymerize. So there's like this kind of trade-off that doesn't lead to any good situation, I guess, in the pyrolysis process, according to this group again. And then anyway, this is just showing like the red things are the bad things, and there's no green thing here. So they don't like this process, This also shows like dwindling return type thing. Like you start out with fossil fuel, you waste some, produce CO2 to make the plastic, you use it, you lose some to the environment, finally you get nothing at the end. So anyway, that's kind of a scheme for this. Anyway, despite that, so there's these companies that are actively doing this, like polystyrene to styrene. So American Styrenics is using that to make virgin polystyrene. So this is the non-recyclable #1 plastic, right? That you can't recycle. So that's good. I mean, if you can recycle polystyrene to styrene, it's good. Probably, I don't know if it has the same, this is from a different group of people talking about this. So, and then use it as jet fuel. So see, there's always this like two-sided thing to it. Like, yeah, so it's a recycling project. We're going to use it to make new polystyrene. But actually, we can make a ton more money just burning it. You know, so it's always like in every one of these companies, it's always an oil company doing it. They always have, oh, but you know, where did all that stuff go? We burned it, you know. But Eastman's been doing this PET thing for a long time. They've gone in and out of business depending on the price of PET or price of terephthalic acid monomer, you know. So they've had that going since the 70s at least, where they depolymerize PET because there's a thing called a de-esterification reaction that naturally happens. So the oxygen bonds will break. It's got an ether bond in the main chain. That's an easily cleaved bond. So you can make monomer from PET. Not very difficult. The question is to make money at it. You know? So they had that process running in the 70s and they shut it down. And I think they reopened it again. So then Shell, new chemicals, pyrolysis oil, and then all the oil companies. I don't know why they just list Shell because LyondellBasell's doing this, Exxon's doing it. I think BP's doing it. Everybody's doing pyrolysis of plastics to make whatever goo, basically. And then conversion project in Indiana could be why Indiana passed this bill for advanced polymer recycling because they have a company, this Brightmark, 100,000 tons of whatever. And Savix in Indiana too, so they might have something to do with it. So probably these people got together and got to make a law that was basically pro-advanced recycling, somehow giving tax breaks for doing it, things like that. And so, I mean, you know, is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? You know, but basically, there are people who think it's bad. You know, and there's companies that think it's good. So, anyway, like I said, so of ballot initiatives to ban plastics or whatever, there's only one, like this California one, and it had this kind of long history. Basically, it was strict, you know, really too strict almost because it couldn't really be implemented. And there was a lot of court things about they have enough signatures to get it onto the ballot, things like that. And finally, they won all their court things. It was going to be on the ballot. And at that point, the state legislature backed down and they made this bill that kind of made this redundant. So they'd never had it as a ballot initiative. It was in 2022, and that same year they passed this thing, Newsom signed it. You know, so it's kind of a funny thing. So there was an effect of this kind of power of the people ballot initiative thing, but it ended up not being implemented. You know, so it's kind of a funny twist to it. But anyway, 8 in 10 people in the U.S. think that whatever, that something should be done about plastic. So that would seem to be like enough to have plenty of ballot initiatives. You know, if there really was like, so 80% is a pretty sizable supermajority of people. You know, you should be able to do something. Maybe if something coherent could be made up, you know, it could happen. But this thing about plastic, so the local things, you know, Bozeman, plastic bags. This is like plastic bag bans in the world, right? It's California, Hawaii, then like kind of all of China, India, right? Australia. So, I mean, the implementation though is kind of like the details are important, like how this thing is done, right? So you can say like we ban plastic bags. Like in China, what is it? I was talking to someone from China and they banned plastic bags, but you're allowed to have it in certain circumstances or something, which makes the ban kind of meaningless. I forget what the circumstance was, like take out food or something, you could have it, but not anything else. And then South Africa banned it, but it's they banned bags that are thinner than a certain gauge so that people would only be able to use thick plastic bags, which is a little bit counterproductive because it's got a lot more plastic in it. But they think that because it's thick, it will be like a reusable. This has something to do, people put value in the weight of things, like a glass bottle you would recycle, but a plastic bottle you wouldn't because it doesn't weigh anything, so the thing is not worth anything. So it's this idea of like adding weight to the plastic could make it more recycled or something like that, you know. Anyway, there is that logic involved. This is a list of the cities. So it's a long list, like it goes on, and none of them are in Ohio because Ohio banning plastic bags. So you can't have any Ohio ones. Anyway, so, but, and it's not all in California, so it is in different places. The international stuff, let's see, so international, like Canada's got a serious effort to ban like straws and different kinds of non-reusable, single-use plastic things, right? Six-pack rings are banned. Canada, I guess. I haven't been there in time. But so anyway, fast food had to eliminate, phase out plastic straws and plastic spoons and things. And then like a bunch of little countries have banned various aspects of plastics, Again, like there isn't a universal rule, so it's a hodgepodge of different local things. And the UN had I didn't put that in here, I don't think. But the UN had recently had a meeting in like Thailand or something, where they didn't invite any company people. They didn't invite, so it's kind of like limited who went to the thing. Only bureaucrats went, in other words. There's like a bureaucratic meeting to decide the future, like United Nations of the world plastic banning stuff. So, and nothing came out of it. So basically, the companies were all upset because they didn't get invited to it, and then all the consumer, whatever kind of activist groups weren't invited, they were upset too. So it's kind of just led to a stirring of the pot. Didn't result in anything. So yeah, South Africa is banning less than 24 micron for bags. So basically they think that's going to be that they would. And then some countries are banning like import, export. Countries have like deposits on bottles. And then Europe has this thing about extended producer responsibility, which is, again, this is like a catchphrase. If you go to the Procter & Gamble webpage on plastics recycling, the whole thing is about this EPR, because Europe has enacted this for everybody. So basically this EPR is kind of a corporate. It's become like the corporate mantra of how to handle the plastics problem. And it basically is a way to distribute the responsibility to a bunch of different people so one person can't get sued. I mean, they don't have this kind of tort law in Europe, right? So that's unique to the US, but basically this is kind of geared towards tort law. Like if you come after somebody and they're doing EPR, then they can say like, well, we have to share all the responsibility for this, including the consumer has to share some of it. So if you sue me, then the government also has to pay something, right? So it's a way to shift responsibility in a sense. But it's also been, I mean, it's been used effectively to like control, like reduce the amount of plastic waste in Europe, especially in the implementation in certain countries. But anyway, they have this, a big thing that they have was in like 2012, like a while ago, or 2000, I guess. So they had this thing about cars. So cars have to be, they gave specific numbers for the percent of plastic in cars that has to be post-consumer resin, right? And then every part of a car that's sold in Europe has to be recyclable. It has to be disassemblable into parts that can be recycled. So that's a pretty strict rule. And basically all the plastic companies got pretty excited about that in 2000. And then that drove a lot of this idea about, well, we have to get serious about this. So it's kind of a small segment of the market. I'm going to try to do a section on automotive, but this is kind of like the rule that made the automotive such a big deal about recycling. Anyway, so that's a big deal. And then they have then they came with a similar rule like 2012 for electronics, and then battery, and then so there's a series of separate things in the EU where they've kind of come up with these sets of rules with fixed percentage targets for recycled components into everything, and also rules about how you build things, like they have to be built so that they can be taken apart into the pieces that will be recycled. Right, and they're pretty strict rules, and that's shown up a little bit in the US, but in the US, there's no mechanism to recycle the things. Like in your EU, this is the whole deal where they had like, they made the rules for the producers, and then there's also the recycling operations that were set up to take care of the whole thing, right? So anyway, we get the cars that could be disassembled, but we don't disassemble them. Now, so it's kind of funny how this thing works out as far as the US, but so we're kind of paying the cost of having a car that could be disassembled and not getting the benefit of it. Then this, wherever I got this is like different examples, it's like, I think this is in Sweden, and it's like something about, instead of having boxes that go to the grocery store, they have like reusable pallets. So they've worked out a way to do this, and they built a whole system to kind of collect the pallets and recycle them and reuse them. So there's oh, here that is this. And, this I guess is a problem that, so they can make PET translucent by putting an additive into it. So, but then the PET isn't recyclable anymore. So basically they kind of banned this translucent PET. Apparently there's a problem in Europe. They banned it, and that was like some kind of victory for the recycling business. And the same thing with carbon black, they've kind of banned it in certain products to try to keep it so that you can get things that are clear, like PET bottles. See, and then these are just showing some case studies, like in France, the extended producer responsibility, blah, 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 and they show like, yeah, our recycling rates have gone up, from 40% to 65%. And then within plastics from 0 to 25 or something, right over from 97 to 2015. So basically it's better than that now, I guess. But the same extended producer responsibility thing in Italy kind of had similar results, I guess. They're implemented, so it's an EU law, but they kind of implemented in the different countries in different ways. So basically, like this one's more like citizen participation type thing. And then in Belgium already had 97, 25% plastic recycling, got it to like 40. So they're already doing pretty good. Then China's kind of leading the way, so prohibit all single-use plastic products like next year, right? So they can implement like things that we can't do. Like they can just say this is what we're going to do and it's done, more or less. But so I mean, in the history of it is that up to 2017, we were like shipping the 4,000 shipping containers of plastic garbage to China every day. So they were building up this big waste thing. Then that stopped in 2017. Then it goes to Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam, right? So it's basically at that point, like in 2017, they're kind of getting, so they made a 5-year plan that goes to 2025 to say like we're going to get rid of all this plastic problem, and they can kind of force everybody to do it, I guess. So there isn't any debate about it. So they have some kind of rules, like if a company is failing to comply with the recycling thing, ask them to make a correction. If they don't make the correction, then they'll be ordered somehow to make the correction. So I'm not sure what ordered means, like you get shot or something, maybe, who knows. But basically, whatever it is, an effective result is that they don't have a bunch of plastics. I mean, they've impacted it seriously, but. And then they've made some rules on microplastics too, which we don't have anything really on that, even on a state level or anything. So there, I think the EU doesn't have any microplastic rules either. So basically China's in some sense like leading the way, these things. Anyway, ban on imported plastics, and then prohibition on food takeaway is a big deal in China, apparently. When they have 17 cities larger than New York City, it's basically everyone's in a big city. So people eat a lot of takeout in big cities. You know, for whatever reason. I mean, the housing's really tight, so they don't have much space for kitchens, probably. And I think stuff is really cheap there too. Like takeout food in China is really cheap. So basically, food takeaway, single-use plastics is a big deal. So they've written laws to kind of deal with that. That's like a timeline for Chinese recycled plastic rules. So I'm not sure how much we could copy what they did, but what they did is effective. You know, so you have to kind of give them credit for what they've done, and it's not necessarily implementable here to do the same kind of thing. It's like a strict rules on things, and people kind of pay attention to it. Since South Africa's made some headways too. So that's about it. I don't have, oh, and Africa's got a lot of plastic bans, but again, it's like there aren't any like police or anything in Africa. So basically who enforces these things? It's pretty hard to tell. Like they don't exactly have, I mean, they don't really have governments. I mean, South Africa does, but the other countries, I mean, I've been to a lot of Africa. There's no real government anywhere. So you can make a law that says no single-use plastics, but there isn't any way to enforce it at all, you know. I mean, there's nothing, you know, there's no government. There's nothing, like you're not gonna see. I mean, if you see police, they're corrupt that way. Okay, so but basically, and you don't see police. So, but when you see them, they're basically 100% they're corrupt, you know, like whatever you do, you can just pay them something. So South Africa isn't necessarily like that everywhere. No, but the rest of Africa pretty much I think was like that. So how you would enforce it? I mean, they can have plastic bag bans, but I'm not sure how they actually enforce it. Because there's plenty of plastic waste there. And if you've seen pictures in Nigeria, the whole rivers in Lagos are like just flooded with plastic, you know, just people toss it. So it's a lot of people, they just toss the garbage into the rivers. It's convenient, but anyway, that's kind of what I have. I might end early today, maybe. I don't know if you guys, is there anything you guys want to talk about, like the thing about using plastic as a we talked about that yesterday or Tuesday, right? That kind of using plastic as a way to sequester carbon.
Just like what we do with that, it's like sink it in the ocean.
Yeah, sink it in the ocean.
It's
That's exactly the idea.
what you're talking about.
Sink it in the ocean. Yeah.
Just sink it.
Yeah.
It's somebody else's problem, not ours.
Like companies get an 8%.
Yeah, in Europe. Yeah. Yeah, there's like a penalty if you use it. So taking out your stuff. I think that's how they operate. So you can pay the penalty and produce black whatever, but basically there's a cost to it. Because it can't, like it kills the recycling stream. Especially for things like PET and polystyrene and things like this. But, I mean, it's pretty popular pigment. Like tires are gonna have carbon black on it. They have to because it conducts electricity, otherwise your tire would arc you drive down the road. It's this functional need for carbon black. That's not enough cases over. So yeah.
Is carbon black only used for a pigment, or is it like a reinforcement, or is it just?
I mean, tires, it's reinforcement, and then if you went on the tour at Lyondell, like they're using it in pipes, like plastic pipes to replace lead pipes, because it's a UV absorbent. So like the pipes can last like 1,000 years or something if they have carbon black. Right, I mean, almost forever. So, but basically without it, the UV, some of the pipe will get sunlight on it, you know, just like degrade quickly.
Mhm.
So that's the main reason they're using it polyethylene. It's not really reinforcement agent. It's, all right, so they try to put things in that are cheaper than the plastic, and carbon black isn't cheaper. It's like costs more, it's engineered, it's like, Burla is a company now that makes it in Georgia, like Atlanta, Georgia. They have a whole research place in the carbon black. And then this like Cabot makes some, and a few companies that make it. But they're all Degussa, I think, or Evonik makes it in Germany. So they're all like kind of high-tech companies. So it's not just like soil, you know. And there's different grades of it and things. So I don't know. It costs more than PE. So basically, they wouldn't put it in unless they needed it. But they aren't using it for tires. It reinforces. It makes like a network and reinforces a rubber. But PE already has good mechanical, so you don't need that. It probably has better mechanical than the carbon black network. It makes it conductive, and it absorbs the UV. Seriously absorbs UV. Like you can't, if you have something with carbon black in it, you can't do any kind of spectroscopy because it absorbs everything. But you can't shine a light through it, like it's black, totally black. So I mean, it definitely prevents UV problems and things. But yeah, I don't know.
Are we gonna have a section going over additives that are commonly used for plastics?
Yeah, originally I thought that. I haven't put it in yet. I mean, right now I just have it broken down by sector, you know? But yeah, we could do that. I can do that pretty easily. I could get the Sun Chemical people to come out and talk about that. That might be pretty good. But so far they haven't responded. Like usually they respond right away. There's one guy there that's really bright, and I thought he would be good to have. And he's a business person too, so he's got a good like on the ground kind of approach to things. But he hasn't responded to do it. And the other people, I don't think they'd be as good probably. So maybe I'll just get the other people to come out, and they can do good enough, you know, and talk about pigments kind of, because they're really worried about recycling. That's a major thing because it's on them basically. You know, they put the stuff in, so they're in the line of getting sued by whatever the woman is in New York, Lavetta, something or other, the attorney general in New York. Like they could reach out to Sun Chemical, they probably sue them. But, so I think they're a little bit worried about liability, and also because they feed into the plastics industry, and everybody wants to know about recyclable. So if they can get an edge up on that, but they're already the largest pigment producer in the world, you know, because they bought some other companies like Clarion, I think they bought in Switzerland, and they bought some other companies. So I think they're the largest pigment now. So they definitely know about it. I think it'd be better to kind of get them to come and talk about it than me talking about it maybe, but so far I haven't gotten them. And so far I haven't gotten anybody from P&G, and I was talking with someone today about it. Anyway, so I might get someone that's retired from P&G because most of their people, like the people that are like they've kind of let the science end of things disappear, and they've got more like business people. So anybody that you get is going to just be like giving you so much fluff and kind of like mixed up with lies and things that wouldn't be, and they won't really allow you to ask them questions, I think, or they're able to evade any question you could ask them. So probably someone that's retired might be a pretty good idea. But I have one person lined up to do that, because I asked the people and they wouldn't find anybody from me, you know? So maybe there is nobody except for this kind of fluff thing. So hopefully I can get someone that we can actually grill and that would give us honest answers about like what's going on, and like is it really like going towards recycle, or is it just like lip service type thing? Like you can ask them that question, you know, and get an honest answer about it. Like I'm sure there's some of it. I mean, the people are good, you know, but the machine isn't necessarily good, put it that way. Like the people mostly at P&G are pretty nice people, and they all of them are worried about the environment and everything. Basically, this is kind of machine that's going down the road, and it's just looking for profit, and it doesn't necessarily care much about what it runs over, you know, and they're part of that machine too, so they can't like say, oh, the machine's bad. Because they're in it, so anyway, we'll see, but basically I try to get someone from there to talk about consumer product stuff, but. Other than that, I could get the guy from Berla to talk about carbon black. He's a pretty good guy. But I'm not sure you could go a whole hour talking about recyclable carbon. Right, there's what they call recoverable carbon black, and there's a lot of meetings on it. So basically, it's pyrolysis. So they take a tire, pyrolyze, and then I guess with no oxygen, somehow they break down the rubber and just the carbon, supposedly just the carbon black is left and silica. You know, so I'm not exactly sure how that works. So the Berla guy could tell us how it works. And then they use that, they'll blend that with like expensive carbon black into a new tire. So it's kind of recovered and reused. But so there's a lot of meetings, like I keep getting emails, like go to the recovered carbon black meet. Like they're in nice places, you know, like somewhere in Switzerland or something, but so like Europeans are big on this because everything, so like I said, every part of a car has to be, including the tires, has to be recyclable. Like you have to be able to disassemble every part of the car, even parts that can't be disassembled, like a tire, and then reused in the same thing. Like, so that's where they got this recoverable carbon black thing from the EU 2020 recoverable car thing. So they're doing it. I mean, there's companies that are making recovered carbon black from pyrolyzed tires. And there's some tire companies that are putting it back in the tires. I haven't seen it on an ad for a tire yet, but I guess you'll see that eventually.
What percentage of the tire is carbon black?
It's a lot. It's something like more than half. The rubber is like 30% or something of a tire. And then this oil is like 20%. So they add oil as a processing aid kind of, but it's almost as much oil as rubber. And then the carbon black is like the rest of it. So it's almost like a carbon black network held together with rubber and oil. It's kind of a funny thing. It's not what you think it is, you know? So anyway, the rubber's processing, so it can't be, I mean, you can pyrolyze it, but you can't do anything else. You can grind it up or pyrolyze it. Basically, any of the chemical processing steps I said you could do to it. Like you could pyrolyze it with oxygen and make syngas. You could pyrolyze it and make goo, or you can incinerate it and make black smoke, I guess, whatever comes out of tires when you burn them. You always see it when they have a riot. First thing you do is torch up the tires, you know, makes it like it's mostly, I think, for a smoke thing, so that the cops can't beat on people or something or other. But yeah, anyway, so there's doing it. It's real lot of activity in this recoverable carbon black. I mean, like we could ask the Bola guy, I guess we can get him to come and talk. Like it would be on Zoom, you know, I don't think he'd fly here. But they'd probably be happy to do it, you know. They're pretty good people. I mean, they have a research lab in Atlanta. I mean, it was a Colombian Chemical was a US company, and this Indian guy, like an Indian oligarch, like bought it, you know. So Berla's an Indian name, and the guy was Colombian Chemical. So now and they have like operations in Asia and Europe, like all over the world, and India. So I mean, India's in Asia, I guess, but so with China, I mean, they have things there too. So anyway, it's a business. It's kind of an interesting business, but it's a little bit narrow focused. Like, I mean, there's science to it, but it's like pretty narrow focus in some ways. I know people at the like Poly One, which has now got a different name, but they're these people that take the pigments from sun and the polymer from Lyondell and make a color concentrate with like pellets, and they make like foaming agent. So all the additives they do. So I know the vice president for research there. So he could probably talk on based on Zoom. They're in Cleveland. He could probably do something on Zoom. Generally about additives. He might be better than Sun. I'm not sure how, I mean, I haven't talked to him in a long time. Like I knew him when he was younger, so I talked to him recently, but actually I went to dinner with him not too long ago, but basically we didn't talk about additives. It's like, I think he's kind of doing business stuff, but he might be able to just, he's a smart guy, like he could go on and on about additives probably and recycling. He might be better than some people. Maybe I'll ask him to do it. That's probably good. I gotta write that down. So yeah, he could talk about all the additives, like carbon black, everything, because they deal with all the additives. Like they make this concentrate thing, and then they're the ones, like if you're at a company making plastic cups or something, so you don't buy a bag of additives because the stuff is like electrostatic. It's a mess. Like you're not going to have that in your factory flying all over the place, carbon black and silica. You'd have to wear like masks and things. So they buy these concentrate pellets. The pellets have to match the molecular weight of the stuff they're making. So there's a kind of a science to blending the things to get them just right to go with different other things. So you add like 1 cup to a big bag, and it goes a long way. It's like a fragrance thing. You only need a little bit to go a long way. And because of that, it's like such a value added. Like Sun's making a ton of money on pigments. The most lucrative is fragrance, like by far. Like so you make a little like Givaudan, you make a little bit of stuff, and it's like you sell it for a ton. If you put it into like soap or something, it's sort of like 1 drop. This stuff we did research with it. Like you have a lab. If you mistake and put 1 drop in the lab stinks so you can't walk into it. The stuff is so potent and smell. Lemon or something, and I mean it's like bad, really bad stuff to work with. Anyway, but making that stuff, it's so lucrative, you know, because it's just a little simple organic chemistry thing, some aromatic things, click them together. You know, it's not hard to do, and then it's selling for like huge amounts of money per gram or whatever, right? So it's like the fragrances, then pigments like number 2 after that. There's also just a little bit in the goes a long way. And the color concentrate business is kind of lucrative too. It's a middleman thing. So, but they're like packaging all the different additives. Yeah, so he would be good. So Amit Kulkarni, I can definitely talk him into talking on. They'll be on Zoom, but not really. And I can try to get. I'll ask the Sun people too again. And then what else? The Burley guy. Huh? I'll see if I can get the Burley guy. I think the way it looks like I'm asking people, like I was teaching that Solar Africa class, and I would ask people and they would immediately say yes. Like, so I could get any, and I asked people from like London, like all over the world, a guy from Israel, like all over, you know, and every one of them said like, yes, yes, yes. They do a Zoom talk for the class. Then I'm doing this class and it's like, it's not like that. It's different somehow. So the one thing was like a fluffy thing, and this is a little bit more like into what their business is. So maybe it's harder, somehow it's harder to get people, I guess, I don't know. Like we were lucky Ryan came, and the other thing is like if he says something, like we really, I was thinking afterwards, like we put him on the spot and it's recorded, and like basically he could get in trouble with his company for saying things, you know. Usually the company people are pretty tight-lipped about stuff because they don't want to kind of, I mean, if it's an additive, it's like a color compounding company, then it's more like they might be looser about talking about it because they aren't actually responsible or something. Like they're making a middleman. It's like maybe they don't care, you know, that much because they're going to sell to someone else, and if it blows up, like that's their problem in a sense, you know. But they bought it from someone and they're just changing it to someone else. The liability could be dispersed to someone else pretty easily. But anyway, I can ask the guy from Berla and see what he says. Like I said, like most of them are like not responding. I mean, I've got a few people, but basically, like I tried to get Liberty Tire, and they originally said yes. Then like it's like totally quiet, and I sent them like 4 emails, like, when do you want to do it? You know, it's like so they're not doing it. I think. So who knows? It'd be good to hear from them and see their video. I can show video of the grinding machines and stuff. You know, it's kind of impressive. I mean, there are really violent things going on to the car tires. So anyway, so I don't know if Liberty is going to show up. I think that they aren't because they haven't responded. And then I'll try to get these other. I can definitely get Kulkarni from Poly One, which is something else now. Probably one changing them to something. These are good companies to work for, you know, because they're Avient, that's what they are. Avient. Oh, yeah, see, they bought Clarion. Acquired Clarion, so, oh, I guess probably one bought Clarion, not Sun. Right, so. Anyway, I mean, yeah, they're all, I mean, they're in Cleveland, they're from Cleveland, that's a pretty good company to go to. I mean, it's pretty low key, but it's also kind of interesting. So, I don't know. It's also, you get into these big companies and they kind of like P&G and they kind of brainwash you. You know? The Poly one definitely would not be like that. It's more like grunt type stuff, you know, so it isn't gonna be like, you don't need to be brainwashed to work for Poly one. You're not doing consumer products, like you aren't gonna worry about what people think about whatever you're doing. So it's gonna be a lot lower key. It's not working at a brewery, but it's kind of like close to that, you know, it's like gonna be low key to work at a place like that. Like you can, and also there's a ton of money, so they'll pay well. So it's kind of like a good best of both worlds, I think, but anyway. Yeah, why don't we quit? I managed to waste time here enough, so. So I'll try to do flexible packaging on Tuesday, then we got that Snyder from Rumpke. And then the whatever on the next Tuesday or someone, so. So that's kind of how it'll pan out, but. All right, so like whenever people are gonna speak, I'm gonna take attendance, so like so that we try to get everybody here, be good, you know, so. I don't really care for me, but I don't think it's good. All right, so hopefully, yeah, and the recording didn't work last time, and hopefully it'll work this time. But I'm not sure why it stopped working. Two people. All right, I'm like, put this down.